we set up a state-funded newborn screening program to offer children whole genome sequencing at birth, free of charge. So it's initially...
For any parent who wants to put their child into this?
Yes, it's an opt-in program, so it involves their consent.
When you think about Drew, is he forever 4 years old in your mind? Or...
Oh, that's a great question.
This is The Path. I'm Becky Quick. Thank you for coming back.
3 seconds. 2.
In my 25 years at CNBC, reporting on the stock markets and American business,
By a lot. It looks like the Dow futures are off by about 33 points.
this is the most important work I've done, bringing light to the sometimes dark and murky world of rare disease. Our 9-year-old daughter, Kaylee, our youngest child, has a rare genetic disease. Her journey and her battles have changed me in so many ways, all for the better. But walking that path, each slow step at a time, is not an easy one.
That's Kaylee and Julie.
Kaylee and Julie.
And Drew. That's the day he was born.
A rare disease diagnosis can be overwhelming, confusing, devastating, and for families navigating a new normal, it can be lonely.
You know, the breath comes out of your lungs.
Hi. Who's a happy baby? Who's my boy? Andrew John.
Adam Anderson's story is like the story of many parents who face the unimaginable. Trying to get help for a child with a medical condition that doesn't make any sense, that they probably have never heard of.
There was a list of, I don't know, maybe about 24 or so conditions, and Tay-Sachs was the one that was the absolute worst. None of them were good, but it was, please, not that one.
Rare diseases impact tiny populations. Just getting a diagnosis can be an odyssey.
There were many, and they were all wrong.
But maybe the path that we as rare disease families are walking doesn't have to be that lonely if we do it together.
Drew passed away on just before Christmas of 2019, December 22nd.
So he was only 4 years old?
4 years old. 4 years old. So I felt like if we canceled Christmas, we'd be giving in. You know, we couldn't do that.
Adam lost a child and did the hard thing.
We fought. We fought.
He turned that loss into action almost immediately.
What if we can get to them before they have symptoms? What if we can get to them before the neurological damage is done?
He changed his life. He changed his career.
We're celebrating the signing and the funding of HB 907, the Sunshine Genetics Act.
He changed laws, opening new paths to genetic testing and helping other families. This is the path to change, the path to answers.
God, is this really where you want me to be in this room right now? I don't want to be in this room, right?
The path to community.
If that's where I'm led, that's where I'm supposed to be.
The path to a cure.
It was true. Happy little
So
guy.
smiley.
Yeah.
That's probably what, like 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm Adam Anderson. I have the privilege of representing the northern part of Pinellas County in the Florida House. I am a loving husband, married my high school sweetheart, and a proud father of 3 beautiful children, Kaylee, Julie, and Andrew. It's been the greatest blessing of my life to be able to be a father and be able to, have such an important role in the lives of your children. I don't know if there's anything more satisfying than that.
What happened with Drew that was different than your other children?
Well, Drew was born, he was our 3rd child. And you don't think a whole lot when you have the 3rd child. It's pretty routine. It was for me anyway. It's easy for a dad to say that, I guess, right?
Hi. Who's a happy baby? Are you ready to do that? Yeah.
He was a happy baby. He was perceived to be very healthy. There were no warning signals, no red flags. And I remember thinking after he was born that this is it, our family's complete.
What's today, January 2016? Drew's first sleigh ride. Woo!
This is now we have the classic American family, right? Two loving parents, he had two older sisters. Now I got my boy. We had the dog, right? So we had the whole package. But around 6 months or so of age, Brianne started noticing some things that weren't quite right. I didn't believe her. Our pediatrician didn't believe her. But moms know these things, right? And I always say that there's really nothing more powerful than the mama bear advocate. Dads are pretty good too, but there's nothing stronger than a mama bear who thinks her cub's threatened, and that's what it was. So we spent the better part of a year, a little longer.
What's so funny? Huh? I love you, buddy.
But Drew would not hit his marks. He was missing some of his developmental milestones. And I remember the pediatrician saying, well, you have to understand, you have two daughters that are also pretty far advanced. Our daughter Kaylee was literally running on her first birthday, and that's not common. So they tell us, well, your boys are just a little bit slower. Mom, you have to just accept it. It's what it is. And that was my opinion too. And then not making the milestones change to some regression. And that's where I said, okay, well, something's not right there.
Regression in terms of what?
He was sitting up and then was having a hard time sitting up. He was able to hold his head up perfectly fine, and then, wasn't able to hold it up all the time. Smaller things. And then he would get the regular colds that kids go through as they're building their immune system. Every time that would happen, he would suffer from another regression of something. So then doctors started listening, and we started receiving, unfortunately, the wrong diagnoses for several months.
What kind of things were doctors telling you at that point?
There was a whole list. There was, just torticollis on your neck. So, things that were more physically developmental, some more cognitive. Cerebral palsy was one.
Yeah.
There were many, and they were all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was probably around 15 months old where we finally pushed very hard to get genetic testing completed on Andrew. And that gave us the ultimate diagnosis that he had Tay-Sachs disease.
And Tay-Sachs, had you ever heard of it at that point? Never
heard of it. We heard of it when we were kind of going through these, missed diagnoses. But we really started learning about it when we finally got the genetic panel done. There was a list of, I don't know, maybe about 24 or so conditions that could be detected on this particular genetic test. And I remember researching thoroughly every single one of them. And Tay-Sachs was the one that was, if the absolute worst that it could have been an outcome. So it was almost everything else on that panel. None of them were good, but it was, please, not that one. And unfortunately, that's what it was.
What is Tay-Sachs for people who aren't familiar with it?
Tay-Sachs is an ultra rare genetic disorder. So, in the rare disease sphere, they're all rare, or they're considered rare. This is ultra rare. So at the time, there were, I think, about 16 children that were affected by Tay-Sachs disease in the United States.
In the United States.
In the United States. Not a whole lot more than that around the world. Over time, the community was so small that either Brianne or I had a personal relationship with every known family that had Tay-Sachs disease around the globe, as far as India, Brazil, South America, and throughout the United States. So it was a very small community. But it's a condition that is much more common in the Ashkenazi Jewish community, which we are not. So when a mom goes to the doctors the first time that they're pregnant, they're usually screened for this, right? They'll ask those questions if you have this ancestry. And the answer was no for us, and then you move on, right? But it's a very, very debilitating disease. So it affects your cognitive function, causes paralysis, loss of fine motor skills, gross motor skills. Probably the hardest really were the seizures. The seizures were pretty horrible. There were days when we were trying to get him under control, where Drew would have 50, 60, even 70 seizures in a single day, which is very, very difficult as a parent to see that and not be able to do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
The seizures started before or after your diagnosis?
Probably around that the same time, and then definitely got worse after. Yeah.
So the day you got the diagnosis, where were you? Do you remember how you felt that day?
Yes, I definitely do. We were at CHOP in Philly,
The Children's Hospital of
the
Philadelphia.
Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Can't say enough great things about that hospital. They do a phenomenal job. And we probably spent an hour and a half or so with the geneticist, walking us through the results. And, we knew that was the last thing that we wanted to hear come out of her mouth. And it was almost like just, the breath comes out of your lungs. It's just it was a debilitating message to hear. And Drew was with us, and I had to be the strong one there, and that was hard. That was really hard. I remember leaving that visit and Brianne not even being able to walk out of the elevator. It was hard to get back to the car.
Was it just the three of you?
It was.
Who held Drew?
Well, it was hard for her not to give him up, actually. But we've always both held him all the time. Yeah.
So you hear it's Tay-Sachs. At that point, they don't have any real therapy or
No.
anything they can really tell you to do.
That might have been the hardest part of it, is that, we knew that there were no treatments. We knew that there was really nothing that can be done. But then when you hear a medical professional also tell you that, it really, really hits home. So the message was more or less, spend as much time as you can with it.
So what did you all do?
We fought. So we regrouped. We had that gut punch that lasted a couple days. And this goes back to the mama bear, right? Mama bear went out and found every support group, every nonprofit that was somewhat even related to Tay-Sachs disease, networked with every family that she could, found all the best caretakers, neurologists, not just from this area, but beyond. We traveled all over the place.
Hello, my name is Brianne. I wanted to introduce you to my family, the Andersons, but first I wanted to meet the guest of the hour, Andrew. Andrew was diagnosed with Tay-Sachs disease.
And we found a research doctor up at UMass, Dr. Miguel Estevez is his name, still working on curing Tay-Sachs disease today. And he was working on a clinical trial. And that gave us a lot of hope. So we almost immediately went and scheduled some time with him and drove up to Boston. He got to know Drew, he got to know our family. And we realized they needed money to do this. So we set our sights to doing everything we could to raise money through the different nonprofits. The Cure Tay-Sachs Foundation was a phenomenal one. Brianne still serves on the board of the Cure Tay-Sachs Foundation today. And that organization and a collective group of parents helped get this gene therapy off the ground, and it's working. Unfortunately, it's working. Unfortunately, it was too late for Drew to be able to receive it. But yes, it's working. It's halting the progression of Tay-Sachs.
Wow.
They're on the second round of it now, so there's some kinks that need to be worked out. But there's definitely promise for sure.
The second round of
the gene therapy.
The gene therapy
trial. Yeah.
How many kids were enrolled in the trial? The first one in that?
I want to say just a handful. Definitely not a dozen. Just a handful.
Okay.
Because there's not a lot of these kids, and it's very difficult for these research doctors to be able to find them. And that's one of the things that we really wanted to solve is how do we figure out a way where we can diagnose these children early on and be able to offer their parents an opportunity to receive a gene therapy, even if it's a clinical trial, to receive a treatment before they're symptomatic. So if we know that there's a condition that has a treatment that's halting progression of the disease, what if we can get to them before they have symptoms? What if we can get to them before the neurological damage is done? Can we stop it from ever presenting itself?
Right.
That's the promise.
Hi. Come on, jump.
Let's go back and just talk a little bit more about Drew. He was born in August of 2015.
Yes.
So that means you got your diagnosis around November of 2016?
Yeah, it was around Christmas time.
And the progression of his disease, did that happen pretty rapidly?
It did. Sometimes when you're really in the thick of it as a caretaker, it's hard to see that. That as they say, the days are long and the years are short, right? And it's very true when you're in an acute, intense situation of being a caretaker. But it did. Yeah, it was every time he had any kind of infection, a respiratory infection, a common cold, he would suffer from regression. His body just couldn't recover from the stress of having some other illness to deal with. So we were always very adamant about keeping as much of a germ-free environment as possible, which we had a toddler and a 7-year-old, right? So that we're in public school, it's almost impossible to do, right? But we did. We made it through it. The girls were phenomenal caretakers for their little brother. They were involved all the time.
Yeah, his sisters, one of the pictures that you showed me, his sisters are reading to him in bed too.
Yeah.
A special time for everybody.
It always was, yeah.
One tractor, two.
We'd encourage that because they were learning how to read at the time. So they were practicing reading and it's getting to spend time with their brother, and he loved it too. Yeah. And that was right before Christmas, I think. I think he passed away maybe a week or two after that picture was taken.
He's a Jets fan, right?
Well, they say you're born Jets fan, so that's how I became one. So yes, he was a Jets fan too. He was born Jets fan.
So the only way you become a Jets fan, I guess.
I don't think Jets fans are made. I think they're born. And this was Christmas Day. A few days later.
After, yeah.
Drew passed away on just before Christmas of 2019, December 22nd.
So he was only 4 years old?
4 years old. 4 years old.
What did your family do after that?
Well, Christmas is a really big deal in the Anderson household. That many call me Father Christmas in my family. And I knew that we host Christmas every year. It's a tradition for many years. 20, 30 people in our house. And we planned to host that year, just like we did all the other years. And a lot of our extended family wanted to relocate Christmas dinner that night. They wanted to bring it to one of their houses. But I was adamant about not doing that for a few reasons. One, I own Christmas and I wasn't giving that up. But I wanted to make sure we kept the consistency of for our family.
For your daughter. Yeah.
For our daughters. And for the rest of our family too. This was a hard situation, not just for us. Sometimes we had to be strong for our parents and our siblings and our cousins. And that kept us going, though. It kept us going. So I felt like if we canceled Christmas, we'd be giving in, We couldn't do that. So we hosted Christmas.
But then you did move back to Florida. And this was right around the pandemic?
Yes, very, very beginning of the pandemic. Yep.
And you moved back down. And I guess over the course of the next year, that's when you were deciding, or you were kind of being pushed to run for state legislature?
I was being motivated by my cousin firmly at times, rejecting his motivation. And Brianne had asked me, she said, well, are you praying about this? And I said, well, I don't know. I asked God for guidance and strength on a regular basis daily. She said, no, are you asking God to lead you where he wants you to be? And I thought, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever done that. So I started doing that every day. I still do it every day today. And that was the catalyst, because these doors started opening up. Opportunities were presenting themselves. And there were many times when I'd think like, God, is this really where you want me to be in this room right now? I don't want to be in this room, right? But I've always had the belief that if that's where I'm led, that's where I'm supposed to be, right? And if the door opens and I don't walk into it, I'm just doing a disservice. And at the same respect, some doors closed. I mean, that wasn't the direction to go, but it definitely turned out to be the right thing to do, as much as I rejected it myself. Yeah.
Part of your experience as a parent, and in particular as a parent to Drew, has helped mold the type of state representative you are. How does your experience play into the way you are helping govern the state?
That's a great question. I would say it's molded just the person in general as well, right? I never, when I first agreed to run for office, I never intended on working on rare disease policy. A lot of people think that's what
I assume.
Yeah, a lot of people assume that, and that's fair, because it's made up such a giant portion of what I've worked on. But that wasn't the intent initially. I was just a free market, pro-business guy that wanted to, small business owner my whole life. But once I got elected and I found myself serving on some healthcare committees, I realized the impact that we can have. And I also realized pretty quickly the lack of support for the rare disease community that existed in government across the board, right? And I also realized that's something we can change, and that's something that I actually have the ability to change. And, coming back to this regular prayer of lead me where you want me to be, that's where I kept going. That's where I continued to be led. And now fast forward, I can't give up.
Senate Bill 1582. Importantly, the bill creates the Andrew John Anderson Pediatric Rare Disease Grant Program to provide grants to advance research and cures for rare pediatric diseases. This initiative was led by Representative Anderson from Pinellas County, who lost his son to an ultra-rare disease when his son was just 4 years old.
Your biggest success to date has been the Sunshine Genetics Law.
Yep.
What is it? How did it come about? What does it do?
We're celebrating the signing and the funding of HB 907, the Sunshine Genetics Act. It's truly a historic milestone that's giving Florida a once-in-a-generation opportunity to lead the nation.
The Sunshine Genetics Act is a very exciting, transformative, truly landmark piece of legislation, which is wild to think that because it originated from my scribble notes on a cocktail napkin.
What were you doing with a cocktail napkin in your hand? What was the conversation you were having at the time?
It was just happened to be what I had in front of me that I could write on, and I started having some ideas about and realizing some problems, and how can we get these? I was trying to think about how can we get these children to these preclinical and clinical trials before they're symptomatic. How do we do that? Because I had networked a lot with research doctors from around the country and especially throughout the state. And there's a number of these even going on today where these therapies are providing tremendous promise. They're stopping progression of these diseases, but they're not able to reverse it. They can stop it or slow it, but they can't reverse it, right? And so many of these rare diseases, they have just significant and detrimental impacts on your overall health. So once you have deterioration of brain matter, it's very difficult or impossible to get that back, right? But what if you could stop it from happening in the first place? So I'm scribbling notes on, how do we do this? What if we can have this? What if we can add it to newborn screening? Another problem was, how do we get our universities to work together? So those,
instead of siloing
them, right? Why are universities competing, right? And if you think about it from a state policy standpoint, we're funding these universities, right? So it's a good business decision. Why are we funding Florida State for a viral vector manufacturing facility and University of South Florida? I'm just making it up for something similar. They should work together, right? So I started drafting this. The cocktail napkin turned into real paper, right? And then it took about 8 or 9 attorneys to fix what I put on paper and make it actually something that could be voted on and passed. But it's giving Florida a truly once-in-a-generation opportunity to lead the nation in genomic and precision medicine. And it's solving a few problems. So the first is it's solving the problem of this diagnostic odyssey, So when I talk about this publicly and in the legislature too, people are always so surprised to learn that it could take 4 to 5 years on average, sometimes 7 or 8 years, to diagnose a child with a rare disease. They might spend 7, 10, even more. There's research that just came out that suggests it takes 17 trips to doctors to diagnose a child with a rare disease.
That even sounds low.
And some, that's an average, right? So some are even way more than that. As hard as our situation was and how difficult it was to go through 15 months of not getting the diagnosis, it's actually very fast, right? Compared to what many parents have to deal with. So I wanted to solve that. So what we did is we set up a state-funded newborn screening program to offer children whole genome sequencing at birth, free of charge. So
For any parent who wants to put their child into this?
Yes, it's an opt-in program, so it involves their consent. It's starting as a pilot program right now. So we have one hospital so far that's identified, and we've secured enough funding to be able to cover the sequencing at that hospital for about the next year or so. But the intent is to bring this statewide. So we're going to continue to advocate for more funding to bring it statewide, but we're really relying heavily too on the private sector because this is a true public-private partnership.
In terms of Florida puts up some of the money, but the rest of it has to be raised.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And we've put it up. So, I was thinking about this as I was coming in today, where a lot of times when it comes to innovation, whether it's in healthcare or aerospace or energy, the private sector looks to the government for help, for subsidies or grants. But in the case of the Sunshine Genetics Act in Florida, we've already built it. Right? We've built the airport. We have the runway. We have the planes. The planes are fueled up. They're ready to fly. How far we can fly those planes just depends on what additional funding that we can bring in.
And where are you looking for funding? Where are you hearing places that might be able to jump in, companies that might be able to jump in?
I think the best really are going to be the companies that depend on this pipeline, right? So the companies that are looking for these undiagnosed children so that they can treat them early, right? And there's many of them. There's many great rare disease companies run by phenomenal people, the biotech sector. I'm really happy and excited that the nation's premier genetic diagnostic company, GeneDx, is our first partner in the program. They have an amazing team of people at GeneDx, and just a wealth of expertise that we're able to leverage in Florida to be able to expand the program.
It sounds like a nearly impossible task because this sounds like a great idea, but actually getting Florida to not only pass the legislation, but then to put up money for some of this too. How difficult of a process was that?
It's not easy to make a law, right? That's what our founding fathers wanted, right? And it's true. The Sunshine Genetics Act had 7 committee stops that it had to clear throughout the process before it could get to the House floor and the Senate floor. And for people that are familiar with the legislative process, 7 committee stops, sometimes people think that's a kiss of death, that somebody high up wants to kill your bill. Right. Because it's almost impossible to get that done. We have a 60-day session. So that means that bill needs to be heard in the committee pretty much every week, or we just run out of time. But we were able to get it done. And it was passed unanimously, bipartisan, every single committee stop, on the House floor, on the Senate floor, and then ultimately signed by Governor DeSantis.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What next? Do you start fundraising right away? How do you do that?
We're fundraising now for it. And there's been some really phenomenal early interest in the program. I think folks in other states are a little surprised that Florida beat them to this, which I find personally satisfying. But the reality is we're not competing with these other states, right? This is a framework that I hope other states will adopt. I want other states to bring these kinds of programs there. This is not a Florida issue. It's not a New York issue. It's not a California. It doesn't matter. It's not a federal issue. It's something that can be done at the state level. We don't have to wait for the federal government to enact these kinds of policies. It's hard to get things done in DC. States can be much more nimble, and it just takes a champion. So I've had a few states representatives in other states reach out to me that are interested in exploring it, which is exciting.
I guess the question would be, do you want to take your newborn baby and put them in something that could put their basic identity at risk? And how do you control that? How do you control that information? How do you make sure that it's not misused?
Absolutely critical. So we need to protect that, right? So we can't let this genetic information, this is DNA, it's sensitive information, right? We can't let that fall in the hands of people that want to do you harm. We can't let it fall in the hands of our enemies. We can't let it fall into the hands of people that want it for profit, right? So it needs to be guarded closely. So the parents will own this information from day one, and that's protected by HIPAA, right? So they're able to communicate with their physicians, but then after that, the information is de-identified.
Okay.
So it's completely anonymous when it's stored.
Okay.
And then from there, members of the consortium that are part of the Sunshine Genetics Act can then use that for research purposes.
It's always such a pleasure to be back here on campus at FSU. Your work today is providing hope to countless families, but it's just a matter of time before that hope is transformed into cures for rare diseases. The genomic medicine industry is estimated to reach $100 billion in just a few short years. And right now, Florida only has a very, very tiny sliver of that industry. Right now, we're missing out on a huge opportunity for our state. But the Sunshine Genetics Act will solve that problem. Florida is now the first and only state in the nation to offer a newborn screening program that's this comprehensive.
This is very exciting. So Florida State is now home to the first of its kind. It's the Florida Institute for Pediatric Rare Diseases. And there's a number of components to it. The Sunshine Genetics Act actually codified that institute into statute to ensure that it goes on to live forever. So someone has to change the law to be able to do away with the Florida Institute for Pediatric Rare Diseases.
And that is not easy to do.
And that is not easy to,
as you know.
It's also not easy to put it into law, but we were able to get that done. So this institute is now the home of a regional CLIA certified genetic testing lab. So that's one of the big components. It's also, they already have, it's relatively new, but they already have 23 ongoing research projects right now in the rare disease space that are fully funded, operational, spread across a number of different types of conditions and diseases, and spread across a number of different departments at the university also. I think what I'm probably most excited about, though, at the Florida Institute for Pediatric Rare Diseases is that there will be a new clinical health center for undiagnosed rare diseases.
Wow.
So this institute will serve as a destination for families to be able to go to from around the state and from outside the state when they can't find the answers that they need through their primary care channels that they have. And the approach really flips that traditional healthcare system upside down, where if you have a condition, you go to the doctor, they'll order the simplest, least expensive, narrowest test typically, right? If they don't find what they want, maybe they'll graduate to a little bit more comprehensive and a little bit more comprehensive. At the Institute for Pediatric Rare Diseases, it starts with whole genome sequencing. So from day one, the entire genome is mapped, and then they work from there to figure out the diagnosis.
Faster process.
You get the diagnosis within a couple days.
Yeah.
As opposed to this diagnostic odyssey that's taking 6-7 years
Right.
for folks without that. The other really powerful thing and the opportunity that exists with this new institute is that through the Sunshine Genetics Act and the consortium that's established there, once that diagnosis is received, those healthcare professionals can then connect them with researchers and clinical trials that are going on throughout the country.
Wow.
So the hope is that will be the conduit to be able to help these parents get their children into these early stage clinical trials and
that's amazing.
Stop progression of diseases. Yeah.
That is amazing. You know, you and I were talking a little earlier, and just the idea that when you say rare disease, people think it's an orphan disease. There's not much you're going to be able to do about it. I think you think differently.
You have to think differently, right? So I don't know why we call them rare diseases.
Because not a lot of people have them usually.
Each one of them is rare by itself, right? That's true. But when we look at them collectively, and I try to change this narrative all the time, any opportunity that I get, is that when we look at rare diseases collectively, there's almost 10,000 known rare diseases that affect 30 million people in the United States. So when we look at them as a group, that's more than the people that live in Texas or more than the people that live in Florida, the two of the top 3 most populous states in our country. More people than live in one of those states is affected by a rare disease. So when we look at them as a group or even within categories of rare diseases, there's many rare diseases that each individual one might affect, 100,000 people, but that category might affect millions. So if we're focused on research and development of treatments for that category of diseases, that's, I think, the ticket really to get more of the biotech and the pharma companies engaged and involved.
And investors.
And investors, absolutely.
And that's what makes the difference. I think you look at this from a capitalist perspective.
That's right.
If you want to get things done, you got to have a market, you got to have money.
That's exactly right. I am a capitalist, right? I'm a free market capitalist at heart, and always will be. And I realized early that in the case of Tay-Sachs, a Merck is never going to invest money into solving a rare genetic disorder that they can sell to 16 people a year. It's not going to happen. We can't expect them to do that, right? But that's where I think government's role and universities' role in the research is that we can support that preclinical work. We can support the early research and then foster a collaborative pathway so those universities can then work with the biotech industry, can then attract capital to bring these platform technologies, platform treatments to market.
Bigger picture, is this scalable nationally, what you're doing in Florida?
Absolutely. It's scalable nationally. Absolutely. We've built it. We have the template for this. And while it's starting as a pilot, our first goal is to scale this across the state. But other states can and should look into this. And I'm happy to make myself available. I tell them, other representatives of the states all the time, I'll do anything I can to help bring this to their state. The way newborn screening works is that it's somewhat driven by the federal government, but the states have all the control over it. So each state would need to adopt it.
You've had some huge success in getting all this accomplished. What's been the biggest hurdle that you've had to clear along the way?
Well, it's never easy to make a big change. So it takes a lot of support. It takes a team of people. I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed to have great co-sponsors over in the Senate, and the support of our Speaker, Danny Perez, and the incoming Senate President in the Florida Senate, Jim Boyd. And they believe in this mission, and they've been very supportive of it. I would say the biggest obstacle is not quite been legislative. It's just been the amount of time that I have to spend away from home.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest part.
When you think about Drew, is he forever 4 years old in your mind? Or?
Oh, that's a great question. No, actually it's not. I see him as a 10-year-old boy. I do. It was probably about a year or so. It still happens once in a while, but in the year after he passed away, he passed away in a little after 3 a.m. And I was woken at 3. And I'm so fortunate that I was able to hold him in my arms when he passed away. And for at least a year straight, I'd wake up every single morning at about 3:00. And it wasn't a haunting experience by any means. I loved it. I loved it. And in fact, thinking about having this conversation, that happened this morning, actually. But he came to me as a 10-year-old boy. Yeah, not a 4-year-old boy. And he's healthy. He's free.
I bet he's proud of what he sees you doing.
I wonder about that, yeah. You know, a lot of times people will say, well, you're doing this for your boy. It's a legacy. And I suppose it is, but I'm doing it for the other kids. That's really what motivates me.
Adam, I want to thank you for sharing your time and sharing your story. And I look forward to talking to you much more about this stuff.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you for tuning into The Path, a podcast and video cast with CNBC Cures. We are starting to build a real community here. I love seeing your comments on YouTube. Not the ones from the bots about crypto trading, but the support and the personal stories that you've shared. Like Len, who has a daughter who's about to undergo groundbreaking ASO therapy for her neurodevelopmental disorder that's caused by a rare genetic mutation. Len is hoping to hear her daughter's voice one day. And Len, we are hoping for that too. I'm honored and overwhelmed by the outpouring from all of you. We're trying to respond to as many of you as quickly as we possibly can, but we're still building the infrastructure here and preparing for our first annual conference on March 3rd in New York City. Ultimately, building this community is our goal, so please be patient. Stay with us. Let's keep this conversation going. If you are in need of help, resources, guidance, please visit the cnbc.com/cures webpage. We have more of your stories there, as well as links to organizations that we feature in our coverage. Subscribe to the CNBC Cures newsletter. That will give you the latest news on rare disease advances, legislative and regulatory attention, or the stories of many brave patients and families. Thank you, as always, to our producers and the team at CNBC, and we will see you next time on The Path.